everyone, welcome to the American Computer Enthusiast Show. My name is Steve Reeves and I'll be your host. We've got a real informative show. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to buy a computer. We've taken off a lot of the questions and comments that have been on our hotline and our email address, and a lot of people want to know about how to buy a computer for the holidays. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. Hi everyone, welcome back to the show. In case you just tuned in, this is the American Computer Enthusiast Show. My name is Steve Reeves and I'll be the host. Actually, I'm the host and the guest tonight. What we've done, like I said in the beginning, is we do actually listen to what people say on the hotline and on our email address and when people leave messages on our website. And one of the big questions that a lot of people have been asking is, what computer should I buy? And with the holidays coming up and different things towards the end of the year with a lot of sales and things, we decided we would dedicate a show specifically to buying a computer. So what I did was I put together a bunch of PowerPoint slides, and what I'm actually going to show and go through all these slides. I decided to do this because you probably get tired of just looking at me the whole show. So I made some fun slides with some goofy pictures and actually clip art that came with Microsoft Works and PowerPoint, Word. I'd love to use all these little PowerPoint drawings here. And I was going to show how to shop for a computer. And what I've done is I've actually brought some newspaper ads from different places like Best Buy and Incredible Universe and Circuit City and CompUSA and Computer City and the business section and different things like that. And I was going to show some of the ways to buy, what to look for, what to watch out for when you buy a computer. Simple things like you know, buying a computer and it's got a great price, but it says in little fine print, monitor not included, or it'll tell you it's a great printer, but it doesn't do envelopes, or doesn't come with any discs, or simple things like that. So what I'm going to do is show you some of the pitfalls of buying some of the things that are in the ads, but also some of the good things in some of these ads. So what I decided to do, let's go to the first slide. First one is just sort of show you what we're going to talk about. How to shop for a computer. We're going to show how to pick out a desktop computer, a notebook computer, how to pick or what to look for in a fax or a fax modem, selecting a printer. We'll talk a little bit about scanners and also some other input and output devices, but also accessories, things that most people don't think about. Simple things like surge protectors, discs, tapes for backups. A lot of people, you won't believe how many people buy a computer with a tape backup and it doesn't come with a tape. So they get all ready to do something that has no tape. And I can't believe that all tape drives, none of them include a tape. I mean, it doesn't include a tape. Same thing with most printers. You buy a printer, it doesn't come with a cable. So you need to make sure you ask for all these things. So that's actually part of the accessory. So we'll go to the next slide. First thing you want to ask is where you're going to use it. You can use it at home, if you have kids. You're going to use it at the office, or you have a home office set up. It makes a big difference because it depends on, a lot of times you may have at the office, you might not need all this wild multimedia, you just need a power computer, something with a lot of memory and a large hard drive and things like that. But at home you may want to have more fun stuff. Although more and more the computers are pretty similar, but sometimes you may need a bigger and faster and more RAM and everything else. If you can use it at home, you can use it for things like AutoCAD or some scientific or mathematical program. So something you want to think about. The next slide is how much money do you want to spend? This is probably the biggest question people ask. If I had $1 for every time someone asked me what kind of computer should I buy, or I have $1,000 to buy and I want to buy a computer, or just the opposite, they'll say, I want to buy a Pentium with 2 gigabyte hard drive, a 21-inch monitor, but I only have $1,200 to spend. You know, you've got to draw the line somewhere on what you want to buy. Do you have X amount of dollars and you want to buy something just to get into computers and be able to expand, or do you want to buy a power system now? The other thing is, do you need a DX4 or DX2? You can find some pretty good deals nowadays on on the 486s, don't even think about buying a 386 anymore. You can, not even a used one really, unless you just want to, you know, your brother-in-law is selling his computer and he's selling it for next to nothing, and you just want to put a computer in your house and you want to be able to see how things work or whatever. But if you're going to buy a new computer, you really can't even find anything slower than a 486. But it now is a good idea to buy like a DX475, a DX4100, but it really makes a lot more sense to actually buy a Pentium. Anything from a Pentium 75, Pentium 100, Pentium 133 if you've got lots of money. But the reason I put those little dominoes are on the screen there, because a lot of people will spend $1,000, get into the computer, and then find out that they have to spend another $5,000 to make it into what they really want. So it's like the domino effect. Once you start buying a computer, next thing you want to know is, oh, I didn't know I needed a sound card. I didn't know I needed a CD-ROM. I need a bigger monitor. I need more memory. So you really have to think about it, and that's why we're doing this show. So I'm going to make sure people know what to ask when they're looking for a computer. If they go to all these different places, Micro Center, Best Buy, there's a billion places now to buy computers. Not really a billion, but pretty close to a billion. Even Office Max, Office Depot, all these places have computers. Even Walmart. I mean, everybody sells computers now, and there's every kind of brand. And like I tell most people nowadays, if you buy a name brand like Compaq, Packard Bell, IBM, the Aptivas, all these different PCs that are out there now, you really can't go wrong. Most of the computer dealers that are no longer around were the ones that were not quite as good, or they've all merged into different vendors, or were bought out or whatever. So the ones that are around now are pretty good. They have good service, good support, good warranties, and different things like that. But you'd want to stick with the name brands. Even though there's some clone people around, still there's clone people around, they have some pretty good deals, but most of the parts in there, and by the time you compare apples with apples, that's no pun intended there, apples with oranges, there's really not a big difference. In some cases, there may be even a better support package that comes with, like, say, a Compaq or an IBM or Packard Bell or whatever. So you want to think about those kind of things. Next thing is where to look for computers. Again, now the sky's the limit. One of the places that I look every week, just because I am a nerd, is I'll always look in the Sunday paper. There are always lots of ads in the Sunday paper, the Chronicle. And there's not only ads specific for different vendors, but also you'll find things in the business section. There's that guy that does the little section every week. It's I'll show you here. What's his name? Dwight Silverman. Dwight Silverman in the business section. And he always has a deal on comparing notebooks, or which computers are good, or which ones come with what software, comparing different things on different software packages. Well, you got a little joke on the bottom too. But you can also find a lot of the clone people in here. Or if you want, you can look at the different ads, like this is the Computer City ad. And it's got everything. It's got, different computers, it's got notebooks, it's got desktops, it's got different software, different add-ons like modems. We'll talk a little bit about modems and printers and larger monitors or whatever. Another thing we'll touch on also is things like upgrading. So if you want to add a bigger monitor, or you want to add a scanner or a different modem or something like that, it's no big deal. And nowadays, a lot of these places like Computer City and things will actually install, if not for free, just some nominal price in order to get you in there, I think, is what they do more than anything else. But also so you won't goof up the computer. You can do it, but nowadays it's become more and more simple. And a lot of the newer computers are these plug and play, or plug and pray, as most people say, where you can put it in with Windows 95 and whatever, and it actually will automatically configure the system for the right soundboard or whatever. But not all computers you can buy today are plug and play. So anyway, the other thing is magazines. You can go, a lot of the PC magazines and different computer magazines that are out there, there's ads for everything like Gateway 2000, Zeos, and all these different computer dealers that are out there, Micron. And these are also good computers. But a lot of these you can only order them by mail order. The one thing you've got to remember, though, when you do this is, you know, you can't go and pick it up. They send it to you. You may have to wait a little while to get it because they may be behind, and when you order it, they may be a week or two behind, maybe a month behind. They're getting better and better, but also support. A lot of times you can get right through. Gateway 2000 was real good at one time, and it got really, really bad because it'd take you days and hours to get through, but now they're getting a lot better. And because they have support and bulletin boards and are on the internet where you can download drivers and new BIOS fixes and different things like that, it makes it a lot easier to fix things yourself. And they have all these different support lines. The other things are mail-outs. I get the mail-outs, little brochures and things from like Micro Center here in town, and you can really compare, again, compare with the ads in the paper, with that, with the magazines, and see what's going on. The other thing is just computer dealers. You can go to, like I said, there's endless amounts of computer dealers here in Houston, and it's a good idea just to make a list of what you want and just go from store to store. I don't know, they'll probably kill me for saying that, but, and actually ask them, you know, how much would you, for this configuration, how much would it be, and the different types of vendors. And another thing are friends. If you have a friend that has a computer and he just bought it a month ago, you may want to ask him, even though he might tell you it's the best thing known to man, hopefully he'll tell you, if I bought this again this week, I probably would have had more memory or a bigger hard drive, or I would have bought this or that. So it's a good idea to ask different people that have computers. And if you have computers at your office, you may want to ask the people at your, you know, in your MIS department or your IS department, the computer people, and ask them what they would recommend. Even though, you know, they may tell you some power system that'll cost you $10,000, you can sort of figure out read between the lines. Next thing is I'm going to go and we'll start with just a desktop. And we'll go with all the different modules of the desktop, and also once we get through the desktop, we'll talk about notebooks. So we're going to talk about the CPU, or the you know, the case with everything in it. CPU is kind of an old term, but pretty much what everybody talks about. The monitor and the video card, the hard drive and the floppy disk, the floppy disk drive, memory or RAM memory, the keyboard, CD-ROMs, modems, and expansion, and what's in each one of these things. So the first slide is what CPU is right for you. There's 2 or 3 things you need to think about when you start looking at computers. There's the desktop, which is the flat kind, like we have right there. That's the flat type. Or there's the tower. 2 or 3 things you need to think about when you start looking at these. One is the tower usually has more expansion room. Sometimes they're pretty similar. It looks just like the same thing, just turned sideways. But most of the time they have more expansion slots. Also more slots for devices like CD-ROMs or tape drives or whatever. You find that a lot of the really small desktop, the real thin ones, they're really nice because they don't take up much room, but there's not much room for expansion. So that's something you really have to think about. The one big reason that people like or dislike towers are, or that's what this one that's on the screen here, is because, you know, a lot of times people will put it up on top of their desk, sometimes they'll put it on the floor. Well, they'll put it on the floor and they'll find that the cables aren't long enough to reach up to their monitor or their keyboard. So the first thing you have to buy, after you buy all this, you get it home, is you go back to the store and buy all kinds of extension cables for your monitor, for your mouse, for your keyboard, and everything else. The other thing that I find, and some people may disagree with me, but I find it at work that it makes a big, huge difference, is if you put it on the floor, it seems like because there's fans, and a lot of these big Pentiums have multiple fans, it really blows around a lot of air on the floor. Well, what that means is it sucks in a lot of dust. And it's amazing the difference of a tower computer that sits on the desk and this tower the computer that sits on the floor. If you open that box up, the ones that are on the floor are always full of dust. And that does make a huge difference in the computer for a number of reasons. One, the grills and things get clogged up with dust and whatever. The other thing is a lot of the RAM chips and things, that dust gets in there, and you'll find that a lot of times it'll say parity error. Well, what happens is a lot of times those the memory chips are in that slot, and dust and things, it gets in there and gets corroded. And a lot of times you have to take the top off and take the SIM chip out, put it back in, take it out, put it back in a couple of times and make a good connection. And 99% of the time, that's because of the dust. Now, other people may tell you different things, but I find from experience that I like to keep my computers up on top of the desk for a number of reasons. One, because I don't like to ram my chair into it all the time. The other reason is I like to be able to see what I put in a disk and that it's reading to the light. I don't like to look on the floor and see if it's going on and whatever. But that's all personal preference. The other thing is, another new idea that a lot of people on these home computers, home office computers, they're these combo units. AST has one, Compaq has one, they're Presario, and these are pretty neat. The one thing you need to think about, what these are combo, the CPU and the monitor all in one. It's like a Macintosh, where it's all in one box. It makes a really great computer, but the one thing you need to think about when you look at those are expansion. Can you expand it? How many cards? Can you put additional cards in? Can you put more memory in? How hard is it to get to it? The Presario, for example, the Compaq, that's a great little machine. It's real easy to work on. The back just unscrews and pulls out like a drawer. It's all in one piece, and there may be one or two expansion slots, but the big difference is you don't need a lot of expansion. It comes with everything you need. It comes with the video card built in, so you don't need an expansion slot for a video card. You don't need to add a soundboard. It's already built in. You don't need a whatever. All these things are already, the serial ports or the I.O. cards, they're already built on into the computer, so you always have these open slots. Now, you use those maybe for a network card or something like that if you had it at the office, but for the most part, you plug them in and away you go. So the main difference between the tower and the desktop, it boils down to personal preference, but a lot of times the tower has more expansion. The next thing is monitors. What monitor is right for you? Now this, you know, who knows the real answer, but there's a lot of things you need to think about when you look at monitors. One is what size. That's a pretty strange looking picture of a monitor, but it was the best one that I could find in my clip art that actually had something drawn on the screen. But the biggest thing is size. Nowadays, more and more computers are coming with 15 or larger monitors. Forever, they came with 14-inch. And there's nothing wrong with 14-inch. The only problem is with most video cards that come with computers, they come automatically configured out of the box for 640 by 480 resolution, which is non-standard VGA, which is what we're looking at right now. 256 colors or more, 640 by 480 resolution. That looks great on a 14-inch monitor. You can configure it for 800 by 600. That looks pretty good on a 14-inch monitor. You go any higher, the text is so small, you can't even read it. You need a magnifying glass to be able to read the screen because it's so little. So if you're going to go to 1024 by 768, or in some cases even 800 by 600, you want to go to a 15 or a 17-inch monitor. Now, a lot of people say, you know, 21 inch is the best thing you can buy. It is and it is and it isn't. You have to actually go and look at it and actually work on it for a while if you want, or if you can. Number one, the biggest problem with the 21-inch monitor is you're sitting usually, you know, 12, 15 inches away from the screen. Have you ever watched your TV and sit 15 or 16 inches away from a 21-inch TV? Your eyes will go nuts, and your hair will fall out. That's what happened to me. But what happens is it may look great from far away, but the closer you get, your eyes will go nuts. So you want to think about that. But in some cases, if you're going to work on a CAD drawings, and you want to get 1024 by 768 or 1280 by 1024, you want a big screen so you can have a lot of lines and things on the screen, as much working area as possible. But for just doing word processing things, there's no way you want to work on a 21-inch monitor. That's why I say a 15 or a 17-inch monitor, those have become really popular because the prices come way down. We're going to start, as soon as we get back, we're going to have to take a quick break here. So stay tuned, and we'll continue with a little talk on how to buy a computer. Hi everyone, welcome back to the show. Like I always say, in case you just tuned in, this is the American Computer Enthusiast Show. My name is Steve Reeves and I'm hosting tonight. And what we're talking about is buying a computer. Like I said in the beginning, what we do is we have a hotline, which will come up at the end of the show, email address, and also a website where an internet website where you can leave messages and things, like what you'd like to see in future shows, comments about the shows and whatever. And between the hotline and email, we've had a lot of people that want to know what computer should I buy for Christmas, or what computer should I buy now that towards the end of the year when all the sales start and things. And there's about 10,000 answers, and there's about 10,000 different computers that you can buy. If you ever pick up the paper, there may be, every paper there's 10 different ads, and they're all just a little bit different. So what we're going to talk about is, I'll get into these a little more later here, but we're talking about, from the screen, we're talking about what PC, desktop, what size monitor, what kind of fax modem, what kind of things to look for. So what we're doing here is, I brought some of these ads and we'll compare apples with apples. So I guess we'll go back to the screen here. What about video cards? Now that's another strange question because there's so many different video cards that are available now, but a lot of them are built into the computers now, and then there's also cards. You want to have as much memory as they call it VRAM, or they call it, all kinds of different video RAM. And what that is memory on the actual video card. It's not necessarily the same as the memory that's on the in your computer, like SIM chips, RAM chips, but it actually speeds up the refresh of the screen. So what I would recommend is to buy as much memory as possible. So a lot of times nowadays there's 1 megabyte or 2 megabytes or 4 megabytes of memory. So what I'd say is buy the 1, 2, or 4 megabytes as much as possible, and you'll have more colors and higher resolution. The other thing you need to make sure about is drivers. The drivers that are available, you need to make sure there's drivers for what software you're using. Windows 3.1 or Windows 95 or OS 2 or Unix or whatever you're going to use. Make sure that the card that you buy or the card that comes with the computer you're buying has the drivers for the software that you're going to use. Now most drivers, if you're going to use Word or whatever, you just make sure that it has the drivers for Windows. So that's one thing you want to think about. All right, next thing is hard drive. This is the biggest question right now. Nowadays, I don't think you can even buy a computer. The smallest I've seen recently is like a 420 megabyte hard drive. Nowadays, it's 540 megabytes or bigger. 1 gigabyte, 2 gigabytes, 6 gigabytes. The sky's the limit. Now, what you need to think about, two things that I put on here, software and backup. Software makes a big difference. If you're going to run, Unix, for example, I don't know if many people that are watching the show or today are buying a new computer just to run Unix. Most of the people that would be using Unix are people that already have computers. But if you're a new user, you want to have as big a hard drive as possible. If you're going to load every software package known to man, and have everything in there, you want to have as big a hard drive as possible. But if all you're going to do is load up Windows and load up, Windows 95 with all your different applications like Microsoft Office or Works or whatever it is, you don't need, a 60 gigabyte hard drive. 1 gigabyte or smaller is fine. Now, where it makes a big difference is when you start getting into these multimedia files. You'll download things, you'll be on the internet, and you'll download all these JPEG and MPEGs and all these different GIF files and everything else, and you'll find you'll have just tons of space of files that you downloaded from the internet, different programs and demos and all kinds of different things. So you want to have as much space as possible to actually take, to put all the fun software that you download. The other thing is backup. One thing that most people don't think about is you'll buy a 1 or a 2 gigabyte hard drive, and what happens is you go to back it up, you don't realize it takes you 5,000 3.5-inch discs to back it up, or you have a tape drive. Well, what happens is the tape drive that you have on your system is only a 250 megabyte tape drive. Well, that'll take 4 or 8 or whatever, depending on how big your hard drive is. You have to think about how many tapes that takes, which means you'll have to sit there and wait for it or keep going back and forth. So you really want to think about, as far as tape drives, and we'll talk about this in a little while, you want to buy something as close or similar to the size of the hard drive that you buy, the same size tape drive, or similar. Like if you have a 1 gigabyte, a 500 or an 800 megabyte tape drive would be good, so you can back up on 1 or 2 or whatever. Not very often would you have a 1 gigabyte hard drive and have the thing completely full. Usually you'd have less, so you could back everything up on one 850 megabyte tape drive, for example. Next thing is how much RAM. Now this is, you know, people argue about this all the time, but what I would recommend, if you're going to use Windows 3.1, I'd recommend 8 to 16 megabytes of memory. If you're going to use Windows 95, you want at least 16 megabytes of RAM. The text is a little small on the screen there, isn't it? The other thing you want to think about is, well, like for example, I'll give you a perfect example of why you want as much memory as possible. Most computers that you find nowadays either have 4 or 8 megabytes. Some of the Pentiums nowadays finally are coming with the choice of 8 or 16 megabytes of memory. Well, if you're going to use Windows 95, you don't even want to think about a system that only has 4 megabytes of memory. You want at least 8 megabytes, like I said, preferably 16 or above. If you're going to use Windows 3.1, I really wouldn't even recommend 4 megabytes of memory. It'll work, but you won't believe the difference if you'd switch to 8 or 16 megabytes of memory. The difference in speed, in bringing up your documents and switching things around and loading or calculations of spreadsheets, all kinds of things. The difference between 4 and 8 is night and day. The difference between 4 and 16, I mean, if you're working an 8-hour day, you can be done in 4 hours. You'll be done half the time. So what I recommend, like I say here, is 8 to 16 for 3.1 and at least 16 for Windows 95. I can't believe the computers people are selling in these papers, Pentiums. You'll buy a Pentium 133 megahertz system with a 1 or 2 gigabyte hard drive with only 8 megabytes of memory. Hard to believe they're doing that. But one thing you want to think about, big thing, is expansion. What a lot of problems with these are is in older systems, not so much the new ones that are out right now, is how you can expand. The problem with the older systems is it has 4 slots or it has 8 slots. If you put 4 1 meg sims in or you put 8 1 meg sims in to get 4 or 8, if you want to go to 16, you have to take out all 4 or all 8 of those sims out to expand up to 16. Nowadays, more of the new computers, because of the 72-pin sim chips, you can put it'll maybe have 4 slots. You can put one 4 megabytes in that 1 4 megabyte sim chip. You can do it one at a time. Where the old system, 30-pin, you'd have to put in either 4 or 8 at a time. You can never put in 1 or 2. Occasionally, you can on some wacky systems. But for the most part, it's either 4 or 8 at a time. The newer 72-pin sims, you can put in, well, just one 4 megabyte, which is good because you can add just one more 4 megabyte, or one more 8 megabyte, or one more 16 megabyte, or multiple 4s or whatever to be able to expand it. But that's one thing you want to ask when you buy a new computer is how is it expandable? Is it going to cost you another $900 to go to 8 megabytes, or is it going to cost you $900 to go to 16 megabytes? And you might want, what happens, you want to ask that up front so that if you have to do it, you don't 6 months down the line find out you need to add 16 more megabytes and you have to throw away the memory that you have. It's better, if at all possible, to ask them if they're going to upgrade it, do it, and give you some credit for that or something like that for the memory that's in there. The other thing is price. The price of a 16 megabyte sim chip, for example, it may be between $700 and $900. It depends on what you're buying. If it's a sim chip for a normal PC, it's about $750, $800. If you're buying a PCMCI card, which we'll talk about later in the notebooks, it may cost you $1,000, $1,200 for a 16 megabyte memory card. So that's something, memory is something you want to think about up front if possible. All right, now we're going to go into multimedia. Sound cards, speakers, microphones, CD-ROM. Now, a lot of the new computers that are coming out today are multimedia compatible. There's a lot of things that people don't think about when they're buying a multimedia system. One is a sound card. I would recommend a sound card that's Sound Blaster compatible and Sound Blaster 16 if possible, because you'll have better sound and more options, and it's more compatible, I think, with different software packages. Speakers, there's no limit to what you can buy. You can buy little you know, $18 speakers that you can buy, you know, these all-tech subwoofers that, you know, sit under your chair and vibrate when you're, you know, flying your jet, you know, around with your joystick and things. And those will cost anywhere from $100 to $500. So you want to think about, I mean, I might recommend, you know, a normal $50 pair. The difference between a $18 pair and a $50 or $80 pair is night and day when you're playing like CD-ROMs, music CD-ROMs and things like that. But for just using it around normal things, it ka-ching when you start up Windows, there's not a huge reason to buy, you know, $500 speakers if all you're listening to is ka-ching. Now, it also makes a big difference if you're playing games and things, so you want to think about that. The other thing is, a lot of people don't, you know, realize that you can do with your PC is actually use it as a, you know, actually talk into it and record your voice. So you want a microphone. I find for everyday normal use, it doesn't make any difference. You don't need to spend more than $25 on a microphone, any kind of lab tech or whatever kind of microphone. It plugs into your soundboard and everything works great. CD-ROM, now that makes we'll talk about CD-ROMs in just a minute here. Actually, we're starting right now. What to look for in a CD-ROM is you want to think about speed. Now, you really can't buy many just regular old 1X CD-ROMs anymore. You may find some used ones or some in an older system you buy from your brother-in-law or something, but most of the time nowadays it's 2X, 4X, 6X, and I've even seen 8X CD-ROMs. Now, 2X is fine for most people, 99% of the people. 4X is more for the faster games that are coming out now or for big multimedia presentations or whatever, and also the 6X and probably the 8X. But you're talking about more money. You'll find that more and more are coming with the 4X because they're gearing up for the faster games and more multimedia and the different. They have different standards now for different multimedia setups. The other thing you want to think about is internal or external. Most are coming internal. Now that's another thing about some of these like Presario. I was telling you the all-in-one, the integrated PC that has the monitor and everything in one. A lot of times you can't put an internal CD-ROM in those. A lot of times, you know, you have to add an external one. The newer ones are coming with the CD-ROMs built in, so you don't have to worry about that. But if you buy an older model that doesn't have one, you have to buy an external. You have a choice of one SCSI, which I can't remember what it stands for right now, but or the Parallel. Parallel, they're getting faster and faster, and it's really nice because if you have multiple computers, if you're a really, you know, big nerd, and you have multiple computers without CD-ROMs, you can take that CD-ROM and switch it from one to the other by just plugging it into your Parallel port, the same port that you plug your printer into, and you can actually, almost everyone that I've seen nowadays, the Toshiba and different CD-ROMs, external CD-ROMs, you can actually plug your printer into the back of that so it runs in line, so you can actually have your CD-ROM plugged in and your printer plugged into the CD-ROM so you can still print things out. The other thing that you'll find are some of them have caddy, some of them don't. What a caddy is, it looks like a little tray that you put the CD-ROM in and then you stick it in the, it sticks it in the slot. Now some people like that, some people don't. Some people find it's a hassle that they have to, you know, take it in out of that caddy and put it into another caddy or put it into the case. Well, the good news is the prices of the caddies are coming down, so you can actually keep multiple caddies and just keep the CD-ROM in the CD in the caddy, so you can just keep them, and it protects them that way too. You don't have to touch them and you don't scratch them up or anything else. The other thing is you need to think about software. A lot of the PCs you buy now, it'll say it comes with, you know, $1,000 worth of software. Well, a lot of the times let's say this, 99% of the time you'll be using Windows. And you got to watch out. A lot of these games and things that come with a lot of these multimedia kits, they'll come with some wacky Indianapolis 500 game or something that's a DOS game. Or there's something that you have to have a bootable DOS disk in order to bring it up, and then you have Windows. So you've got all these wacky things with different drivers and everything. I'm just giving you, this is just a Steve warning here. I'd recommend stay away from those games if at all possible, like some of them that come with the CD-ROM. Now, Doom and those kind, now that's a different story because those run in DOS and you want to be able to play those and because they're pretty cool. But But some of these, you have to have all kinds of strange disks in order to start it up. So you may want to ask and find out, ask around at other people that have the same system that you have or whatever, and find out what games will work in Windows. I'd rather you stick with games and things that will run inside Windows, unless there's something that's pretty big that people know, like Doom or whatever, that'll run in DOS that won't mess up your Windows system or mess up the way it's configured. I'd stay away. There's one, it's called, I think, Indianapolis 500. Hopefully they're not watching tonight and they'll probably, you know, blow my car up or something, but that is the strangest game. I find it goofs up everybody's computer I've ever seen it installed on. All right, next thing, how to buy a fax modem, or what to look for in a fax modem. You want it as fast as possible. If you're going to call on America Online or CompuServe or the Internet or Prodigy or whatever, not all of them have availability with the higher baud rate, like 28.8 or 28,800 baud. A lot of them are only 14,400 baud. But you want as fast as possible. You do not want to call the Internet with a 2,400 baud modem. Or even a 9600 is pretty slow nowadays. You want to go with 14.4 or 28.8 as fast as possible. And now most of the online services like CompuServe and America Online have 28.8 available in Houston, and it makes a huge difference. You won't believe. You'll spend a little bit more money on a modem, but you'll save over time in download speed. It may take a minute as opposed to 5 minutes to download the same file if you have a 28.8 baud modem. And the next thing is internal or external. This is personal preference, but I find I like the external for one reason. One, because I like to look at the lights. I like to know if it's working, if it's downloading, if we're just stuck or whatever. The other thing is you want to think about the internal. If you do internal, a lot of times that'll take up one of your COM ports or your serial ports, so you can't hook up a mouse or you can't hook up a serial printer or something, whatever you might have. You need to think about other devices you're going to hook up. If you have an external, you can have a switch box and switch between the different devices. Software, that's another big thing. You want to be able to, hopefully, if you buy a modem, get some software, like a fax software or communication software or something like that. You don't want to buy a modem that doesn't come with anything. And another thing you want to think about is it'd be nice if it came with Windows software, like SmartCom for Windows or WinFax Pro or something like that. Cabling and answering machine. We'll talk about that as soon as we come back to the break, so stay tuned and we'll be right back. Hi everyone, welcome back to the show. In case you just tuned in, this is the American Computer Enthusiast Show. My name is Steve Reeves, and what we're talking about tonight is how to buy a computer. How to buy a computer for the holidays or towards the end of the year or for Christmas or whatever you have. So, because there's some pretty good deals out there now for 46s and Pentiums. The prices have come way down, and it's unbelievable what you can get now for a pretty good price. Less than $3,000, less than $2,000 in some cases. You can even buy a computer now for $1,200 that's perfect for most people at home. What we're talking about now is fax modems. One thing you want to think about, one thing that more and more computers like the Hayes Acura and some of those, they actually come with a cable. You know, like, duh, well, you know, finally they're getting with the program. For years, if you bought a modem, it didn't come with a cable. So the first thing you had to buy after you bought the cable, I mean the modem, is a cable. You can go anywhere, Computer City, CompUSA, anywhere. You can buy a cable as long as you want. A serial cable for a modem, you can have it 50 foot long if you want, or they actually have little short ones. I've seen them for even notebooks and things like that, there's like a 3 foot or even a 1 foot cable. And you want to think about, make sure that if you buy a computer, it comes with a cable, if it has an external. If it's an internal, you don't need a cable. You need a phone line, but that's it. Answering machine. Now these are pretty cool. Like the Presarios, the ASTs, different computers like that, they'll say they have a built-in answering machine. Now, that's a great idea, but a lot of people don't realize what that means. That means you have to have your computer on 24 hours a day. It's got to be running, and it's got to be up in Windows or whatever, if it's a Windows program that's answering the system. A lot of people don't want to keep their computer on all the time. That's another thing about fax software. A lot of people don't realize with faxes, if you're waiting for a fax to come in, it means you have to have your computer on all the time. A lot of people don't want to have their computer on all the time. So that's something, it's a great, cool thing, but doesn't always work in the real world. All right? What online service, since we're talking about modem, what online service should I use? America Online, CompuServe, Prodigy, Microsoft Network, Internet. A lot of these, or actually pretty much all of them now, have access to the Internet to be able to, download files, FTP, to file transfer protocols, what that stands for, or bring up web pages or whatever you want to do, email. They've always had email, but be able to do it within the Internet. The way this works is there's no right answer here, but I actually have an account on America Online, one on CompuServe, one on the Microsoft Network, and also have a subscription or a provider, an internet provider. Because I am a nerd, I try to have as many as possible. The only one I don't use is Prodigy, and I don't really know why. I guess because I just ran out of, I can't make up that many email addresses is what it is. Not really, but I don't know which one's the best, but I like nowadays, America Online's pretty slick. It has a nice interface, it's easy to use, it has the 28.8 baud access to be able to call in from Houston. It has a pretty good interface with being able to bring up web pages of browsers, but it doesn't always bring up, if you have Netscape, for example, with a real internet provider access, and you bring up America Online, it may look completely different when you look at the same identical web page. For example, my web page that I have through America Online, when I did it on America Online, I thought it looked pretty good. Then I went over to Netscape and it looked completely different. So because I knew more people had Netscape, and it's probably better to look better on Netscape than it is America Online, I made it look right in America Online. CompuServe, the same way. They've got a nice Windows interface, Prodigy does. The Microsoft Network, now many different people will disagree with me on this, but I don't particularly like the way, it seems awful slow, and it's kind of, brings up all kinds of stuff all the time. I just like to go where I want to go and not have to wait for it to refresh the screen. And I have a 28.8 baud modem, and it's still slower than beans. That's a technical term there. And then Internet, having a provider like Phoenix or Neosoft or whatever, you want to make sure that you have as fast a modem as possible. 28.8, like I said, I wouldn't, nothing less than 14.4. You can't even really buy anything slower than that. But like I said, these are the top, I'd say, 4, and all of them have access to Internet. What kind of software should I look for when I buy a turnkey system like a lot of these in the paper? Windows 3.1 or Windows 95, something you want to think. Most of them are coming with Windows 95 now, but like I was saying, you have to really think about how much memory it has. If it's only going to come with 4 and you have no more money to spend on memory, I would recommend sticking with Windows 3.1 for the time being. Word processors, did I spell that wrong? Word processors, spreadsheets, database. I should use my spell checker. Is that right? Yeah, it looks right. Databases, accounting, bookkeeping like Quicken and Money and those different software packages. Communications. A computer without communication software, like something to be able to call up CompuServe or America Online or be able to call your buddy that has a modem for a bulletin board, without communication software, that modem is worthless. Games and utilities. Now, one thing I would recommend, and I can actually do this from experience, my mother-in-law and father-in-law, they bought a computer that had 4 megabytes of memory, and it had Works, Microsoft Works. And that was perfect for a Windows 3.1 with 4 megabytes of memory. The problem is, if you add Word Perfect or Perfect Office, whatever it's called, and you load this all up with all this overhead, and it has 10,000 megabytes of software it's loaded up there, you don't want to run a 46 with 4 megabytes of memory. It'll be so slow, it'll be almost impossible to use. That's why they install things like Microsoft Works, which is a great program for everyday use, home use, even Office. It has a word processor built in, a database, spreadsheet, communications, simple and easy to use. It has, translate files to and from Word, WordPerfect. You can bring in Excel spreadsheets. You can bring in different things like that. So the reason they put that on there is because it only has 4 megabytes of memory. You don't want to load, Microsoft Office or Perfect Office or whatever if you only have 4 megabytes of memory. So I see nothing wrong with using Microsoft Works on a PC until you get more money or whatever to add more memory to it. But communication software like WinFax, they have a WinFax Pro, but a lot of the systems are coming with WinFax. They have a stripped-down version, doesn't have all the bells and the whistles. Word processor, spreadsheets, games, sky's the limit there. And utilities, a lot of times they'll come with utilities for a different interface for the front end of Windows or whatever. Next thing we'll talk about is notebook computers. A lot of the same things go with a desktop computer. Well, the way this works is, one thing you want to think about is the speed is, when you get it seems like nowadays it's a little bit different, but the faster this PC, like a Pentium notebook, you'll find, of course, the battery won't last as long because it's it runs a lot faster and it actually burns the battery or runs the battery down a little faster. So you want to make sure you find out how long the battery will last when if you have a Pentium 133. Make sure that it comes with a floppy disk drive. A lot of times you'll find this great notebook computer and you find out that the floppy's not included. It's an external. It costs you another $199. Screen size, the bigger the better. You want as high resolution as possible. PCMCI, a RAM memory. You want to have, again, same thing as a desktop. PCMCI slots, the little slots in the sides for cards like modems or sound cards or whatever. Little slots you go in there. Nowadays, I don't think you can buy many with less than 1. That's 0, I guess, is less than 1. But most of them now come with 2. So you can have 2 slots in there, be able to add another hard drive or whatever. Now, a lot of the new ones have removable modules that you can take out the floppy disk drive and put in a CD-ROM or another battery or whatever. Keyboard and monitor connections. A lot of them you'll have to add a little expansion replicator, they call it, I don't know, some sort of replicator that goes in the back, so you can hook up an external keyboard or an external mouse or an external monitor. And also, something a lot of people don't think about is a case. They get this $4,000 or $5,000 notebook, and they get home and find it didn't come with a case. So you need to think about that. How to buy a LaserJet. You want it as fast as possible. Paper size, make sure, it does 8.5 by 11. In some cases, you may want to be able to use legal 8.5 by 14. Another big thing you want to think about is, does it do envelopes? A lot of people don't realize they'll get this great LaserJet, doesn't do envelopes or doesn't do it right. Memory, most most lasers that come out of the box nowadays have enough memory, but you want to make sure it's expandable and it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg to add more memory. Interfaces, there's different things, parallel, serial, and also for an Apple or a Macintosh. If you're going to use it with a PC, you want to make sure it has a parallel adapter. Now, most of them have that, but just to make sure. And drivers for Windows. You want to make sure it has updated drivers. For example, you don't want to buy some off-brand LaserJet that doesn't have Windows 95 drivers or whatever, so you want to make sure of that. Next thing is, well, you can see there, I didn't have a picture. Couldn't find a picture of a DeskJet, so I made up DeskJet. That's a joke for the day there. You want to figure out if you want color or monochrome. The difference between color and monochrome, obviously one's color, one's monochrome, but is in speed. You'll find that the color's pretty cool, but it'll be slower, usually about half or even slower than half, as fast as the monochrome, black and white. Paper size, again, most LaserJets you're limited to 8.5 by 11, 8.5 by 14 envelopes. There's some DeskJets that will not do envelopes. You want to make sure you think about that. Memory, not many DeskJets are expandable. Some are, some aren't. And if you're going to do big graphics, color drawings, you want to be able to expand. So one thing you want to think about is asking, can you expand it? Same thing with interfaces, same thing with drivers. What about backup? We talked about this a little bit already, but one thing you want to try to match your backup. This is an external backup here, a picture of it. Some of them are internal, some are external. You want to match the size of your hard drive if possible. Now, or close to it, or what you normally want to back up. And not you always have to back up the entire 1 gigabyte hard drive. You may just want to back up what you've done in the last week, or just your document files, or just your drawing files if you're using CAD or whatever. So you want to think about that. Another thing, you want to make sure what software you're going to use. I recommend if you're going to back your complete hard drive up, you want to back it up from DOS. Don't do it from Windows, because with Windows there'll be open files and it doesn't back up everything. The other thing is if you want to restore it, if your hard drive gets wiped out, you restore it, you're going to have to load Windows up before you can restore the software. So it's better to do it from DOS and get a complete software backup. Compression, you want to make sure that you buy a 250 meg tape backup, that it backs up 250 megabytes. You don't have to buy some special tapes or whatever. And also speed. A lot of them are, with the software, you can adjust them so you can do it for speed or accuracy or whatever. So you want to think about all those different things. Next thing is accessories. Surge protector, discs, tapes, mouse pad. One of the cheapest, best things you can buy is a mouse pad. This is just one. We had these people on the show one time, and OmniPage people. But, I mean, these things cost next to nothing, but it'll save the life of your mouse. It makes a huge difference. Dirt doesn't get caught in here and everything else. It usually rolls a lot better and everything. So you won't believe a lot of these PCs do not come with mouse pads. Cables, extensions. I talked about that earlier, but to make sure if you buy a tower system that you have cables long enough to reach where you're going to put it. Input devices. We'll talk about this just a little bit. Mice. Nowadays, most mice that come with the PC are fine. A lot of the notebooks have these little eraser type things that they're in the middle of the keyboard, and you'll find that you're using your finger. Some of them are pretty neat, some of them are pretty goofy. Again, personal preference. I'd recommend adding a mouse if possible. If you're not going to, it might be hard to use on a plane, a notebook, but not how many times do you use a notebook on a plane, unless you do it for a living. Digitizers, that's if you're going to use input devices. They're big pads that you use for CAD drawings or drawing pictures and things. And joysticks, that's another thing. You buy this $2,500, $5,000 computer with multimedia, CD-ROMs, everything else. It doesn't come with a joystick to play the games. So nowadays you can buy a pretty good joystick for $35, $40, $50. And Microsoft has a new one out. I saw it in the paper here. It's called the Sidewinder 3D Pro joystick. It's $69, $70. And it's supposed to be optimized for Windows 95 it'll work with all the software and everything else. It's supposed to be pretty cool there, $69. I don't know if we're supposed to be talking about prices, but anyway, we're talking about prices here. Okay, scanners. Now we're just talking a little bit about this. Scanners, there's handheld scanners and there's flatbed scanners. The handheld are pretty cool because you can do a fast little drawing or a photograph or whatever, but if you're going to do something bigger, you have to make sure that the software that comes with that hand scanner has a splicing software that'll put those two strips together to make one picture. Flatbeds are a lot better for that, and a lot of people have these at their office or whatever. You can take something and scan it in, and some of them have the software OCR software that'll actually scan the document in, and then it actually converts that text into a word processing text file. What's new? Now here are some pretty cool things here. These multi-purpose devices, the things that are all one. If I was to do it over again now, I would buy one of these things, I think, one that's a copier, a fax machine, a scanner, and a printer, all in the same device. You just plug it in there and wham, it works. Everything in one. It saves a lot of space, saves a lot of money. And, to compare apples with apples, if you compare buying all four of those devices in one of these, it's usually about a third or half the price. And the thing you got to think about nowadays, though, most of them are just desk jets. So they're not as crisp and clean maybe as a 600-dot laser jet or whatever, but the nice thing about it is usually plain paper. They're relatively fast, but the best thing is they save a lot of money. The other thing, they're faster CD-ROMs like we talked about earlier. 8x, 6x, 8x, that's 8 times the normal speed of a CD-ROM. And when you get into a lot of these big multimedia programs and things, you want to think about that. Now here's one of the most important things about buying a computer nowadays. Classes, support, and warranties. Now, one thing that I would recommend is you can never learn too much about your PC. I'd recommend taking any class available. A lot of these places like Computer City, CompUSA, Micro Center, all these places have classrooms at the actual store that you can take classes on. Windows, Windows 95, Word, Microsoft Office, Quicken, all these different things. Like I said, you can never learn too much. And so you want to take classes if possible. You want to find out if they have classes available. The other thing is about support. There's a lot of different things about support and warranty. Two things. that I can think of right off the bat is, if something breaks, are they going to come out to your house and fix it? Or is it on-site support? Do you have to carry it in? Is it going to cost you when you carry it in? Is it going to cost you more if people come out? Is that included? Is it 1 year? Is it 90 days? Is it 2 years? Is it actually expandable, or extendable? Like, for example, if you buy, I know Computer Works up there in North Houston, if you buy, some of these refurbished PCs, it's a great deal. It's unbelievable, some of the prices. You can actually buy one of these Presario 520s, for example, with everything, and it comes with like 90 days or 1 year, and you can extend it to 2 or 3 year for almost nothing. It's unbelievable. So you want to think about warranties and support. Phone support, is it 24-hour support? Is it only, 9 to 5 or whatever? So you want to think about that. And if you have any questions, what I put up here is all the different ways to get a hold of me or the people that do the show. There's the ACE hotline. You can call us at 587-6949. This will come up at the end of the screen. I guess I could have made that a little bit bigger text there, couldn't I? And the other thing is email. You can email me at sareeves@aol.com. That's America Online. Or sreeves@bmc.com. That's at my office. Or you can do the web pages. You can see, and that'll come up at the end of the show, the one that's on the Phoenix. Or you can do the one. I just made up my own new web page, which is http, it's users.aol.com/sareeves/steve.htm. And I'll be, there's all kinds of goofy things on there, and I'll be keeping up on what's coming up on future shows and whatever. So I want to make sure everybody watches more of the shows. Make sure that we'll be showing this, repeating the show. So if you have any relatives that need to know more about computers, make sure they watch this. And I guess that's it. Thanks for watching the show. We'll see you next week.